about how marriages have changed over the years. So here's our outline, changing picture, the time-honored marriage premise, from yoke mates to soulmates, and how marriage has become deinstitutionalized, and then overall happiness, well-being, and life satisfaction. So the next slides I have brought forward for the sake of this lecture. So as I mentioned, it has changed. The proportion of Americans between age 18 and older has significantly declined in the last 50 years, from 72% in 1960 to 49% in 2014. People are also much more likely to be older at the age of first marriage. I know when I was married in the 80s, at the age of 27, I was considered old at that time. Today, it's not unusual for 30-year-olds to be married for the first time. And an important reason for this is the economic shift, because Americans wanted to make sure that they can afford to be married. So the marriage gap is the disparity in marriage rates between the poor and the well-off. So in your text, it talks about among all males between 30 and 34 years old, 53% of them are married. But for those who earn less than $5,000 annually, only 20% are married. And then those who earn over $100,000, 73% are married. So that gap proposes that people who have more money marry at higher rates than those who do not. And then states who have seen a decline in median household income, such as Florida, are likely to see a decrease in marriage rates. The biggest changes in marital status is that of homosexuals. In the 70s, it was unheard of. And then in 2015, states began legalizing same-sex marriages. The different roles that families play has changed over the years. Basically, couples determine who's going to do what. I remember when I was a stay-at-home mom, I performed many household roles, and then I started working, and all of a sudden I felt that those roles were not very equalized within our marriage, because I continued to do everything I did before I started working full-time, and I soon realized that I couldn't do everything. So my husband and I worked that out and divided the roles more equally among us. So your book talks about how couples have changed from yoke mates to soulmates. In other words, yoke mates meaning the society has different expectations of what the couple should do, where soulmates is when they have those choices. So the marriage premise is that of one of permanence, the expectation that you are going to have a monogamous, sexually exclusive marriage. And in individualistic societies, one's own self-actualization and interests are given priority, but in collectivist societies, people are identified with and conform to the expectations that are set by their ancestors. The marriage premise sees marriage as a social institution with certain expectations. So, with regard to marriage, an individualistic orientation results in three developments. The authority that your ancestors have, and over the years that has weakened. Individuals are beginning to find their own marriage partners, where prior to that their marriages would be arranged in many societies. And today, romantic love can be associated with marriage. Not marriage as an obligation to have a family, but to have a marriage and a romantic relationship at the same time. Marriages are becoming deinstitutionalized. The family definition and social norms that we used to have for families are less present today. An example of that is childbearing outside of marriage now carries little stigma. It's fine for somebody to have a child and not be married. Back when I was in high school in the 70s, if somebody in my class would have gotten pregnant, they would have been an outcast. And even before then, if a daughter became pregnant as a teenager, she would be sent off to live with an aunt, have the baby, give it up for adoption, and then come back home as if nothing had happened. So times have certainly changed in this area. Marriages have shifted from being institutional to compassionate to now what we know as individualized. So an institutional marriage would be a social institution based on what it was your duty to be as a part of that family. Families were organized around economic production. In fact, they had kids in order to be workers. There was a kinship network. Families all lived in a close proximity, had great connections to the community. The father was the authority figure, and the marriage was a functional partnership. Functional meaning a part of that family for a purpose. So they were yoked together in that institutional marriage bond. They had high expectations and were strongly connected to their extended families and communities. The companionate marriage bond meant that the couple was bonded together because they wanted to be companions. They would see a division of labor. They would determine who was going to be the main breadwinner, which was usually the husband. The woman was usually a stay-at-home mom. They were working together for the American dream, but they would divide some of the roles within the family among each other. 4 characteristics that distinguish an individualized marriage. Today, it's optional. If you choose not to be married, that's perfectly fine. There's not a social stigma. Some families may not look upon those who were not married as highly as those who were married, but when society views that, it's their option. Spouses' roles are flexible. Be not uncommon for a woman in the family to be the main breadwinner, for even fathers to be a stay-at-home dad. It expects rewards that involve love, communication, and emotional intimacy, and it exists in conjunction with a vast diversity of family forms. It's not unusual to have blended families today, homosexual families, etc. So through all this, we have a weakened kinship authority. The extended family isn't as strong. Don't have to have children at different ages. Since the 40s in westernized societies, kinship has less to say about a couple's choice in marriage. Your family of orientation is the family you grew up in. Young adults are often remaining with their family of orientation. It's not uncommon for a teenager to go off to college and then come back and continue living with their family as they delay getting married and living on their own. Family of procreation is the family that's formed through marriage and having children. So some interesting customs, jumping the broom. This was very common among African Americans in early days, and so you'll read a section about this in your book. But to summarize, it was a way of culminating their marriage ceremony. So at the end of the wedding, the couple might jump over a broom that was lying on the ground or one that was standing up in a doorway, and that symbolized the wife's commitment to her new household, and it was sometimes said that whoever jumped the highest would be the family decision maker. So I'm sure a lot of girls back then wanted to jump the highest. Another tradition some of you may have heard about is that of carrying the bride over the threshold. And your book doesn't talk about this, but this is something that I find to be interesting. So I Googled it and learned that ancient Romans started it. The bride had to show that she was not at all crazy about leaving her father's home, and so she was dragged over the threshold to the groom's house. Ancients also believed that evil spirits, in a last-ditch effort to curse the couple, hovered at the threshold of their new home, so the bride had to be lifted to ensure that the spirits couldn't enter her body through the soles of her feet. These days, it's just for fun. So if you've heard of that, and basically when I got married, I just knew that my groom would carry me over the threshold when we went into our home for the first time, symbolizing that we were married and going to start a household of our own. So there's a little bit of history on jumping the broom and being carried over the threshold. Deinstitutionalized marriage. There is policy set today as this view declines. Individualism now has caused a moral weakening and self-indulgence, and as a result, we're less likely to choose marriage, so we're staying single longer. We're more likely to divorce and are often less child-centered. The deinstitutionalization of marriage proposes that marriage as a time-honored family tradition counts for less based on our behaviors today. So the first years of marriage are often wonderful. You're in love. You have all these wonderful expectations and goals. So it's often seen as the happiest, with a gradual decline in marital satisfaction afterwards. So some reasons for this. We often say that kids, K-I-D-S, is a four-letter word. Kids change your life forever, most often in a positive way, but they do change the way your household operates, the time young couples have to spend together. Their economic situation often changes, as kids are not cheap, as we're going to learn in our group discussion this week. So the stress of children can cause a marriage decline, and then the inevitable decline from the emotional intensity of falling in love. It's just not sparks and fireworks throughout your entire life like it might be the first year of marriage. So we need to have realistic expectations, knowing that it's not going to be a honeymoon forever, and we will have life obligations. Stresses are going to come along the way, disappointments, and we have to work through those, knowing that the more we work at having a good marriage, the more rewards we will get in that relationship. So we have to create a couple connection. We have to maintain a high priority for the relationship, be supportive of one another, have great communication, enjoy your leisure activities. We all need rest and relaxation, vacations. Ellen Friedman is one of my favorite authors, and she says that couples need a date once a week with just themselves. And then every 3 months we need a weekend together, and then every year we need a week-long vacation with just our spouse. Can you think how wonderful your marriage would be if couples made this a priority? Often economics and of course kids make this a challenge, but we need to strive to have time together so that we can enjoy our time with one another and not be brought down by the stresses of life. So we have to consciously and continuously strive to maintain intimacy. So those are the slides that I wanted to cover. Enjoy the rest of this chapter.